Good morning and welcome to the decision session executive member for economy and strategic planning. It's Tuesday the 24th of November, and just going through the agenda in sequence. So in terms of agenda item 1, declarations of interest, I don't have anything that isn't already on the council's website of interests attributed to me. So that brings us on to item 2, which is public participation, and we have registered this morning Councillor Claire Douglas. So Councillor Douglas, would you like to make your points, please?
Thank you, Councillor Waller, and also thank you to the officers from the Economic Development and Skills team for their continued work as the strain on our city's businesses of all types continues to increase. I'd like to speak on agenda item 4, York's inward investment approach. I'm very concerned to see that of the 1,800 new foreign FDI, foreign direct investment projects the UK secured in the financial year 2019 to 20, the Yorkshire and Humber region attracted 104 projects, and of that, York attracted only 2 projects over the same period, creating a meagre 18 jobs. For a city of York's stature, transport connectivity and highly trained workforce base, this number is well below what should be expected. This area needs a far more proactive approach, and I'm dismayed this deficit has been allowed to fester for this long. With the opportunities brought to our city by the York Central development alongside the challenges facing us due to Brexit and coronavirus, it is essential we bring investment into our city. Without a decisive refocus on inward investment, our city will not see the much needed increases in average annual income for our residents and reductions in the level of inequality across our city we are all acutely aware of. Agenda item 5 covers the Council's Apprenticeship Levy strategy. I'm wholeheartedly in agreement with the need to transfer as much unused City of York Council levy to local SMEs as possible. But I am eye-wateringly dismayed to see the level of unused levy the council holds in its pot. Since its introduction in 2017, the pot has accumulated at approximately £500,000 per annum. It currently holds £1 million, even after the return of unspent funds to the Treasury on a rolling 2-year basis. That's a minimum of £1 million of public money earmarked for training and skills development in York that hasn't been used for either young people entering the workforce or existing council staff to upskill. This is an area with great potential that the council has catastrophically missed the mark on. This is a prime example of where the council should be acting as a good ambassador for the effective use of apprenticeship levy funds across York's larger employers. Unfortunately, I can now see why the Task Group for Economy and Place Scrutiny Committee was deterred from taking this subject any further forward in mid-2020. Quite frankly, it's an embarrassment and needs remedying as a matter of urgency. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Councillor Douglas. This brings us on to agenda item 3, which is the sector roundtable update.
Councillor Waller, that's myself to present this paper.
Right, thank you very much.
So the paper provides an update on the Council Sector Roundtable initiative, and this is an initiative that has been established in partnership with York's key business support agencies. So Make It York, York University, York Bid, the local Chamber of Commerce, and also the FSB. And more recently, the IOD as well has been involved in some of our internal discussions around business engagement and business support. The aim of the initiative has been to understand the changing needs of businesses in response to COVID-19 and to develop appropriate provision, but also to lobby government for resources. The Sector Roundtable initiative has been a key part of our approach to business engagement during the pandemic. In terms of the initiative, 3 rounds of Sector Roundtable meetings have taken place between May and September 2020, with over 200 businesses taking part in the initiative across a broad range of sectors. As you can imagine, business feedback has been very wide ranging, but there has been some common themes that have been able to be pulled out from the engagement that we've taken part in. These include access to finance. So many businesses were concerned about cash flow and future pipeline of work. They were also indicating that the lack of finance was a barrier to business recovery, especially in terms of investing in things like technology to improve business performance and productivity. Other issues included the reduction in operational capacity as a result of social distancing measures put in place. This was very apparent in retail, hospitality and leisure. As we've already discussed in previous decision sessions, the summer did see an upturn in fortunes for those businesses with the work that the council put in place to utilise outdoor seating and spacing, very much appreciated by those businesses taking part in the sector roundtables. We also saw businesses concerned by a lack of consumer and business confidence, especially during the first national lockdown, where businesses were concerned about what happens once they reopened. And I'll talk about some of the measures that we put in place with the council and partners to help overcome some of that. And we also saw businesses concerned by the health and well-being of staff working remotely. Many businesses who traditionally operated in office environments did switch to working remotely. And generally speaking, they did remark that working remotely suited them as a business, but also suited their staff. But there were cases identified where certain members of staff did find it quite difficult to work from home all the time. And I'm sure we all have our own experiences as council officers of working from home during the current period. We often assume that staff have the necessary equipment and conditions at home to be able to work effectively from home. But that's not universal, and businesses did speak about those issues. And then finally, a lot of businesses were talking about the need to repurpose city centre space, talked about utilising empty premises and areas above shops, a very frequent subject of conversation in terms of economic growth and regeneration. And they also talked about the need for more flexible workspaces, looking ahead to that new normal perhaps. And then finally, the most recent sector roundtable, or the most recent rounds, saw businesses also voice their concerns over the lack of certainty regarding the UK's future trading relationship with the EU. And again, that's a subject that we've regularly discussed at your decision session over the last couple of sessions. And we're also engaged with our partners over at Make It York and ALEP around making sure that we have the necessary business support and information to support businesses in putting together the processes they need to respond to all eventualities regarding the UK's exit from the EU. Moving forward in terms of the kind of next steps then. So as I mentioned before, we've used these sector roundtable discussions and engagement to really respond to the economic needs that businesses have raised in these sessions. So following on from some of the intelligence in terms of CYC support and partner support, we've helped businesses to reopen by issuing business packs. We've extended foot streets. We've also installed visible signage. Over the summer, we also took forward car parking incentives and also developed and implemented a tourism marketing strategy to increase footfall in the city centre and to encourage residents back into the city centre and support businesses to boost their trade. We've also lobbied for additional business support from government, and this has been quite wide-ranging, but I'd like to draw out some specific examples here. That includes support for businesses with rateable values of above 51k. They were excluded from the government's initial round of business support during the first lockdown. It's pleased to see that in the second national lockdown, those businesses are now available for business support from the government's grants. We've also called for targeted support for York's hospitality sector and also lobbied for a more localised version of the job retention scheme for those places facing public health restrictions once York went into tier 2. Obviously now we're in a second national lockdown and we have called for businesses who have been severely impacted by COVID-19 restrictions but will not benefit from the government's grants to also get in touch with us and to highlight their plight. Moving forwards in terms of the sector roundtable initiative, it's very clear from the feedback that we've had that businesses found them to be both beneficial but also welcome the ability to have a two-way discussion with the council. As I've already talked about, the intelligence has shaped our response to the city, and we'd like to continue this engagement moving forwards. Of course, across the various sector groups, representation from business and the quality of intelligence has varied, and therefore moving forwards, we do propose that perhaps some of the sector groups that we have currently operational at the moment maybe should be replaced by additional networks that meet on a regular basis, and perhaps that's a duplication of efforts, or even we engage with those businesses in a different way. So we do need to vary our approach there. It's also important to note that the Sector Roundtable initiative is very resource intensive and does require significant staff capacity to deliver current staffing levels within the council's economic growth team, and Make It York do present a challenge in seeking to continue business engagement through the Sector Roundtable approach. But we do want to continue along the lines of what we've already set out through the approach, and the quality of business engagement that we've been able to achieve through this initiative is really unrivaled to anything we've done in the past. So it is important that we continue that approach. So therefore, I am proposing in the report that we do seek to be creative in continuing engagement in the short term through the approach, and that might require us to think about engaging with businesses in different manners. So maybe using email communication rather than trying to pull together 12 sector groups moving forwards. We do want to use that communication method, an engagement method, to engage with businesses on the council's forthcoming economic strategy, also the skills work that our colleagues are doing, and as well as other strategic matters that are important to the council and the city. And therefore, this is why in the report we asked to continue basically the Sector Roundtable approach that we've set out over the last 8 months. And there's clear benefits to be had from that, as you can see in the report. So that's the paper, Councillor Waller.
Thank you. Having participated in some of the sector roundtables, I can see the importance of active engagement with a wide range of businesses, and having different sectors at different roundtables has enabled a more structured debate tailored to the companies who are there. And I think it's important that there is full engagement with the executive. I know that I've written letters in relation to companies that have missed out on government grants, and I know the leader has as well. And that has played a part in, with other councils making similar representations, the lifting of the bar on support for businesses with rateable values greater than £51,000. And whilst recognising the tremendous effort that's been put into ensuring prompt payment of any government funds that come our way into businesses, it has been useful to find out those other aspects of issues that businesses are dealing with in order to keep going, as well as those that are looking forward to the recovery and the steps that might be taken. So I think it's important that the aspects of utilising space for grow-on companies to look at what we need to assist businesses to relocate within the city and to expand in order that opportunities for job growth are fully maximised. And I think that's an important factor that should be added on, that the next report should include the work that has been done to respond to these requests. I appreciate that certainly with the city centre, there were a lot of very quick decisions made in terms of traffic orders, in terms of licenses, and in terms of mechanisms over the summer to keep businesses running and utilise public space. But there's now longer term issues that we would be looking at to facilitate recovery. notwithstanding, we have to get through the period between now and mass vaccination. So it is important to keep businesses running. But I think the level of contact directly with businesses, I understand, Simon, that there's over 1,000 businesses registered for the weekly update.
There are, Councillor Waller, yes. There's about 1,000 that get it direct, and then there's probably another 2,000 or so who get it through some of the networks that we're connected with as well.
And we're much closer working with networks like the Federation of Small Businesses, Chamber of Commerce, Make It Your Bid, Retail Forum. So I think that that's been an advantage to the city, that information has been shared, and that there has been the opportunity to look at policy changes that could facilitate that. As Alex raised the issue, there is growing concern about Brexit. We are only days away, 38 days, I believe. And the pronouncements by the Governor of the Bank of England yesterday that in the long term it could be more damaging to the economy than a hard Brexit would be more damaging to the economy than COVID, is a very serious statement for the Governor of the Bank of England to be saying. And I think that there does need to be as much done to preserve businesses in the city, to overcome any difficulties that might arise. So I appreciate that there's significant references on the Chamber of Commerce website and Make It York's website in terms of support, because a lot of the issues will be in terms of form filling and making sure that goods can get in and out of the country. Alex, do you have any follow-up work that's being done in relation to the situation? Obviously, there's training events which are publicised in the weekly update, but in terms of just a situation after the 1st of January, not sure what exactly we would be facing, but to enable those businesses to look at it.
We've been in conversations with the LEP around how they can support businesses on the ground to deal with all the possible eventualities as a result of Brexit. They have been given funding from BASE to employ one-to-one advisors to work with businesses on the various aspects that you just highlighted, Councillor Wallace. So understanding how Brexit impacts their business, but also helping with some of the form filling around getting goods in and out of the country. So I have been told that the LEP have had their budget doubled for EU exit, and they're looking to bring on stream 5 or 6 advisors in addition to what's already provided by DIT to support businesses on the ground. So hopefully moving forwards, York should have its fair share of support on the ground to help businesses deal with the impacts of Brexit. And that's a lot more support than we've ever had to deal with EU exit. So I am optimistic there in terms of support being available to businesses in the city beyond just information on websites.
Yes, I think that is important, but rather than just hoping, I would request that there are regular updates to verify that York is getting its fair share of that allocation of resources. It is utterly vital that businesses are not impeded with the changes that will be happening after the 31st of December. So if that could be included, I'd like regular updates, and if that could be included in the quarterly economic updates, that's important, and to demonstrate that we're getting our fair share. So with those additions to the recommendations, happy to approve. Brings us on to item 4.
Thank you, Councillor Waller. So this is our paper on York's approach to inward investment, which does a number of things. It's a general paper around inward investment, what it is and what it isn't. It talks specifically about the work that we are beginning with partners around the city to develop our both our approach in terms of our partnership working, but also our prospectus as a city and the way that we reach out to the world. So I think I'd start by saying that inward investment is a really important tool in economic development. It's one of the important tools. It's not the only tool, and working with businesses that want to come to York is as important as it is to work with businesses that are here already and want to expand. Our speaker at the start of the meeting highlighted one of the statistics in the report about the low level of foreign direct investment into York. In the same year that we got 18 new jobs from foreign direct investment, there were about 1,000 jobs added to the economy in York. So it shows that while there's more to be done in terms of attracting foreign direct investment, it isn't the only thing which will help our economy become stronger, and it's not the only thing that's going to help us grow more well-paid employment and make our economy more inclusive. We need, however, new employment at all levels in York, both for people with high skills and qualifications, but also for those who haven't got those qualifications, but have got great talents and skills to bring to work. And we need jobs across the economy. And we also need to be very mindful of the need to grow more green jobs in our city to match our aspirations more generally. Thinking about inward investment, it's useful to think at least in two ways around it. I'll say one is around foreign direct investment. So that's overseas companies either coming to invest new in the UK or coming to buy businesses over here and begin their approach to working in the UK economy. We've highlighted, I'll say, some of the statistics and shown actually it's been quite difficult for a city of the size of York to really get its voice heard in what is typically a reactive response to foreign direct investment. It tends to filter down to us through government, through our regional local enterprise partnership, to us that somebody is looking for a site, and we respond to that, and we hope that York is successful in such a pitch. 2/3 of all of the foreign direct investment has gone to London or to the other to Edinburgh or Cardiff or to the other core cities like Leeds and Manchester and Bristol. It mostly goes to large cities as it stands, and that's partly because the system takes it that way if you keep your approach simply reactive. We're talking about in the paper about how we want to be more proactive in our approach, and we want to reach out. As actually was outlined in our master brief to the master developers of York Central over a year ago in terms of the approach that we should take in terms of the kind of sectors and also the kind of scale of businesses that we're looking for. Some of what we talked around about a year ago has moved on in terms of how we are all working differently now in the pandemic, and a lot of thinking going on at the moment around how important are large offices in cities and how can more remote working and indeed more satellite offices support businesses. Those are all great opportunities for York and ones that we would really like to capitalise on. One of the key things I'd like to highlight in this report is the list at paragraph 24, which comes from EY's UK Attractiveness Survey. They talk to inward investors and talk to them about the kind of things that are really important in the places that they choose to invest in, and it highlights the importance of transport and digital infrastructure, of skills, of the availability of other business partners and suppliers, local labour costs, such like. There's a list of 10 things there, and what stands out to me really strongly from that list is just how many of those things that are important to inward investors are actually things that the council does, things that we're involved in, but perhaps we haven't been thinking as clearly as we might be about how we might align all of those things to attracting businesses and attracting business growth. And indeed, if we look back 5 years to when we effectively outsourced our inward investment team into Make It York, we put an approach which is really focused on promotion and on dealing with those reactive inquiries. We're now recognising that really what we need to do is to add to that a much more proactive response, which thinks about how we work around those key issues that, say, are highlighted at 24 in the report, and make sure that investors can have early and honest discussions around what is and isn't possible in our city, to make sure they don't waste their time and to make sure that we attract those who are really well placed to come to the city. And a lot of those discussions, it's really important, happen within the council and as quickly as possible. So we recognise we need to increase the scope of what we're doing inside the council to add to the work that, say, Make It York have been doing around promoting the city. And in terms of how we promote the city, we are also suggesting we need to develop something which is much closer to an inward investment prospectus for businesses that want to come here and expand, that can begin to set out some of those, the 80% of anyone's proposal, which are going to be in common across the way they do things. So we want to develop that prospectus. We want to continue to develop the partnerships that we've talked about in the paper, and that involves working, yes, with national and regional government, but also with other partners in York, such as Ferrous Science, such as the universities, our colleagues at Make It York, and indeed the business community and the developer community. We see a model which basically has Make It York promoting the city and doing a lot of the more visible work around inward investment, ourselves supporting that in terms of the background work that needs doing. The education system has a really strong part to play in terms of developing the talent and supporting lifelong learning and making sure that businesses can recruit the staff they need. And then business networks have a real clear job in welcoming investors into the city and making them part of our economic fabric. So we have two recommendations for you. First is to note our renewed focus on inward investment and our work on partnerships. And the second is around the creation of that prospectus to support all aspects of that work.
Right, thank you very much, Simon. This paper had come at my request. I was very conscious of the need to ensure that York was in a strong position for the recovery. I had sent the relevant officer in Make It York some prospectuses from a previous era where there had been substantial efforts made to promote the city, and I think that given the current interest in moving businesses out of large cities, that York is ideally placed for a tranche of those where they work with our existing businesses, that the critical mass in rail tech and in biosciences and with other businesses, then that's an important feature of the long-term recovery of the city. I think in response to some of the comments that were made, clearly a hard Brexit or the threat of it has been a significant cooling effect on foreign investment within the UK. Why would you as a foreign company invest in a nation where you do not know the trade agreements going forward? And therefore having certainty has been absent in respect to what an organisation could do after the 31st of December. And equally, uncertainty over York Central. I'd like to thank the work that officers have done to persuade government to live up to commitments, to actually ensure that the significant funding to open up the site has been made. And I would contrast that with some of the activities of the Speaker's political group, which has been to create uncertainty over York Central. Therefore, it is important that if we want to position this city for investment, we are pulling together. And that is a plea I make to all parties and all organisations. This is not a game. This is people's livelihoods, and we have to cooperate. So I think it's important that the work that has been done to deliver this paper is continued, and that there is every step made to ensure that we're following up leads, that whatever happens to the government's plans for Brexit, that we do everything that we can to help businesses to flourish afterwards. There may be greater emphasis on Australia, New Zealand, Canada. I see that there has been a piggybacking of the Canadian EU trade agreements for some time to buy a bit of time for negotiations, recognising that trade agreement had taken 7 years to implement. And one can't help but feel there's been a dose of reality following the change of administration in the United States, which even the White House has had to concede overnight that Donald Trump lost the election. Therefore, there is a reality check being implemented there. So I think it's important that this work is implemented, and that there are regular updates contained within the quarterly economic report to show what is being done. And there are lots of links that I'm following up to encourage people to see York as an area for investment. We want long-term investment. We don't want those foreign investors that dip in and out of cities trying to get enhancements just to run off to another location when the time suits. We need consistent investment, and as I said earlier, that fits with the strengths of the city and recognises that we have particular specialisms that we want to be known internationally for having. So thank you very much for that report, and I agree the recommendations with the additions that I've detailed. Thank you. That brings us on to item 5. Alison, are you leading on this?
Maxine.
Oh, Maxine's leading on this, right.
I'll hand over to Alison in a few minutes just to give the context of this paper. This paper outlines a strategy to ensure that there's a way of transferring unallocated levy funding from City of York Council to support apprenticeship activity in the SME, public sector and voluntary and community sector in the city. This would be a proposal that we transferred up to a maximum of 20% of unallocated City of York Council apprenticeship levy to ensure that it's supporting apprenticeship activity in the city. That means that the unallocated levy is not lost, and that it's actually encouraging SMEs and the community and voluntary sector to consider the use of apprenticeships as part of their staffing complements by helping them to cover the 5% training costs. It's very important to understand that the levy can be used to support training costs, but not actually the costs of salaries. So there are still other barriers to overcome in terms of encouraging the growth of apprenticeships in the city, but this would make a very positive step towards removing one of those barriers and ensuring that we are supporting economic activity in the city through the apprenticeship routes. Our skills team have considerable experience in supporting apprenticeship activity in the city through the operation of the independent York Apprenticeship Hub, and that will continue to provide a brokerage element in the city to help people to understand the opportunities that apprenticeships bring to organisations, and also to help navigate the complexities of the apprenticeship world. One of the things that we have seen over time is a gradual growth in the internal use of the apprenticeship levy by teams within City of York Council. That unfortunately was impacted by the response to COVID-19, and our internal City of York Council apprenticeship task group continues to work with managers internally to both encourage the benefits of taking on new apprentices, but also using it to train existing workforce. But we do feel that even maximising those opportunities internally, we will still have an opportunity to transfer levy to encourage further apprenticeship activity in the city, and we do feel that it's important for the council to take the lead to encourage other levy payers to use their unallocated levy in a similar way to support activity in the city. Alison, would you like to add any specifics?
Yes, thank you. I think really just to say that what we're talking about here is unallocated. So levy becomes unused at that 2-year point when it goes back to government. So we're trying to be proactive here, forecasting that we're not going to spend and utilise all that we can, not least because of COVID and the reasons that Maxine's outlined. But actually, we can try and actively promote that to SMEs in the right space at this moment in time, as apprenticeships in the city starting to pick up in some sectors, low volume, but we can help to support that, particularly in line with kind of the national and government funded initiatives that are coming on stream. It's part of it is about transferring that funding, and part of it is about making it as simple as possible for businesses to tap into both that national and local resource. And that's what we're very good at in the skills team and the Impartial Apprenticeship Hub, working with partners right across the city to support that. Equally, I won't go into all the technicalities, but it does open up the provider market for those SMEs as well. And it helps to support the providers that may or may not have had an impact of COVID recently. So we've got those networks, and what we can actually do is through that, there is then potential that through the council's own delivery in terms of apprenticeship strategy, working with other businesses in the city, we can then work with those providers that potentially we can help to influence some of that provision on the ground. So again, linking it back to what we're trying to do to support businesses and the city to recover. Yeah.
Thank you, Alison, for that. I'd asked for this paper to come because I was aware of the work of the team to ensure companies were taking up available resources, and clearly there's since the announcement by the Chancellor and Prime Minister for support for 19 to 24-year-olds, and there's a whole raft of different funding streams that have come online, which is quite perplexing to small businesses that don't have a dedicated resource to focus on that. Neil, you wanted to come in on that?
Well, just when you're ready, Councillor Waller, I mean, I just would like Alison and potentially Maxine just to talk through the actual restrictions on the spend, because it's not actually just general spend on skills and training, which I think the assertion was
right.
Money has had to go back and we've not spent it on skills and training. It's been
okay.
Just to explain how it was very restricted at the start. Whilst there's been on unfettering, it still continues to be very restricted. I think it's worthwhile in officers explaining that.
Okay, I was coming to that, but thank you for anticipating my question. So I think because there was so much news on schemes, as well as the background of the work the team was doing to reinforce that apprenticeships cover a wide range of activities, a wide range of ages, that modern apprenticeships are more wide in terms of their ability for businesses to tap into, but on the specific points raised, if you wanted to answer those, Maxine.
Yeah, sure. I did note the comments, obviously, from Councillor Douglas about the unallocated funding over time. As Neil has explained, this is not just a general skills budget. It is actually, there are restrictions that are placed on it in the way that it can be used. So it is to promote apprenticeship activity around retraining existing workforce or to provide training for new apprentices, but that doesn't cover salary costs. That's very, very important to say. It is purely a training budget for organisations to use for existing and new apprentices. You still have to have sufficient funding to be able to engage new apprentices and to support them throughout their apprenticeship programme. So you have the full salary costs, which you can't take from the levy. And you also obviously have to have the opportunities through the various apprenticeship standards and frameworks available to be able to access things which are valid for the existing workforce. Some local authorities have attempted to address that by putting people through expensive master's level courses. So some local authorities have done a blanket training programme around all management accessing, for example, master's level, level 7 apprenticeship programmes. That is now being discouraged by central government, that approach. And so what we've been doing very carefully is publicising genuine opportunities within City of York Council for managers to provide opportunities to upskill staff around priorities linked to the development of teams, existing teams within City of York Council. And we've been trying to maximise those opportunities at a time, obviously, when the size of the workforce internally has been declining. So we've still been seeing a growth in apprenticeship activity in CUIC when the numbers actually working for CUIC have been declining over time. So you could say we've been using every opportunity to maximise our use of the levy. What we are recognising, though, is I think we've got a social responsibility as a council to also look at the way in which we can use an allocated levy to promote the apprenticeship routes across the city, particularly for those smaller businesses that actually find apprenticeships quite a difficult route. There are complexities, you've got to be able to have sufficient infrastructure to be able to support apprentices within your organisation. So there does have to be someone who can be a mentor for the apprentice. There needs to be an induction tutor. There needs to be regular liaison with the providers. And these are all things that the skills team are helping SMEs and the voluntary and community sector to navigate as part of the work that they do through the York Apprenticeship Hub.
Thank you, Maxine. Tracy wanted to come in.
Yeah, I think that the word navigate there is quite an important one that Maxine just used, because you do need a map, a compass, and a GIS system to be able to navigate your way through this one. And we are not the only city partner who has really struggled to make the use of their own allocations. Even for educational institutions across the city, they themselves have struggled to be able to spend their allocated levy.
Right. Okay. So from that information and from the report, and I thought paragraph 9 detailing the different new funding streams, which was discussed during Business Week on the Tuesday morning, where we had an entire morning dedicated to skills and apprenticeship and training. There was a lot of information there, and it was helpful to talk to businesses about how some of the businesses, how they were approaching this. So I think what would be helpful, because I'm very content with the recommendations there, is to include an additional one to report on the outcomes. I appreciate that you're doing everything that you can to fully utilise that as City of York Council, but clearly we've got a budget process to go through, and therefore there are some key decisions about staffing levels. Therefore, that impacts on the number of apprentices that you could have. Equally, with the team going out and actively supporting SMEs, the public sector, you will find instances, I'm sure, where people would love to utilise the money, but there is something preventing them.
Yeah.
And therefore, it's important that that information comes back so that we are able to lobby. I am more than happy to write to ministers pointing out where the announcements have not had the intended consequence at a time when businesses really need all the support they can get. Then connecting the announcements from ministers with actually activity on the ground. I think that is very much the council's role in collating that in an objective way. And so, as I say, I'm happy to write to ministers. I'm sure that you yourselves will use your channels, and we've got the LEP to get messages through. So I think as an additional recommendation 5, that there are regular reports on the outcomes from the experience of the apprenticeship team, so that we can identify hurdles that just as we have done in previous items today, in pointing out where businesses were not getting the support in grants. Equally, there's a need to point out where even with learning about an individual situation of a company, there's just a barrier.
I think it's the complexity of the apprenticeship framework which really needs highlighting to central government. They're not making it easy for people to be able to put in place the training and support that's necessary. Even the providers actually are struggling sometimes to develop the new apprenticeship routes.
And I think there's also the view from the apprentice that they would want to be in a position they can see through the entire duration of their apprenticeship, even if they're moving from different construction sites, different businesses on projects, but that because they're taking an investment themselves in time, and therefore they need to have the confidence that they will be able to see that through to fruition and then enter the job market that way.
Definitely, and we can bring to you some of the examples that we've got from our in-house provider, York Learning, around some of the problems that apprentices have had completing their apprenticeship. So that's definitely something that we can give you a flavour of.
So that I think so that would be reported to me on a quarterly basis.
Yeah. Okay.
I think if you liaise with Simon, whether that could be included in the economic update. But at least, obviously, don't hold information. Don't delay information coming forward if it can be.
If it can be brought.
Happy to take. Yeah, I could be happy to take a separate paper if there's an issue that comes forward, but otherwise within the quarterly.
Thank you. That's really helpful. Thanks.
Okay, so with that additional recommendation, agree with that. So that brings us on to item 6, infrastructure funding statement. Mike, you're on mute.
Sorry, good morning, Councillor Waller. Good morning, colleagues. Infrastructure funding statement. So a new piece of government legislation with the snappy title of the Community Infrastructure Levy Amendment in brackets England brackets number 2 brackets came into force, was introduced last year. It introduced requirements for the first time that planning authorities publish an annual infrastructure statement. The first one has to be published by the end of December this year. Obviously, many authorities are like ourselves, that we have Section 106 obligations, but quite a lot also have community infrastructure levies, where monies can be spent on a whole range of different infrastructure projects. And for those authorities, the reporting arrangements are a little bit more complicated than they're going to be for us. So we don't have SIL, we just have Section 106 planning obligations, which are obviously reported publicly on the planning committee reports that go before planning committee and the subcommittee. Obviously, each of those documents sets out what the obligations are. We then, during the course of the year, capture that information through our internal audit processes. What this report, this new piece of legislation requires, is that we publish an annual report which sets out the overall position in terms of Section 106 obligations, where we've received money, where we've spent money, and it puts it in the public arena. It would be subject to your approval. It will be published on an annual basis. It will give members of the public who are interested in these things the overview, enable people then to come back to drill down into specific planning applications and their obligations. Paragraph 17 on page 54 sets out the details of what it is that it covers. It's the things you would expect, really, where there are monetary contributions required from developers to mitigate against the adverse impacts that their developments may have. And in some cases, there are non-monetary requirements. So things like children's play areas or recreation provision. The monetary ones are quite specific generally, and that's unlike SIL. So we have very specific requirements, and those are usually set out in the planning committee reports. The report that we will produce, I think, will hopefully be fairly easy to read, and Mark, my colleague, can come in. I think in some cases, simple spreadsheets could be provided, but we feel we probably need to give a little bit more information for the reader to understand what it is. But I think the highlights here are that it is just about Section 106 obligations, and it does give public visibility and transparency to that process for anyone and everyone who is interested. Mark, I don't know whether you wish to add anything, or really, I guess, ready to take questions.
Well, I picked the point up about the sort of the format of the report. I think in the first instance, within the sort of national guidance that's been produced as part of the national planning practice guidance, there is an option to produce this information in three sort of spreadsheets. Now, one advantage to that is the fact that that can be sort of then interrogated by sort of spreadsheet software such as Excel. But when you sort of look at them for the purposes of reading them, they're not very reader friendly. Now, moving forward, as we develop sort of internal monitoring processes and things, we potentially get to a point where there's more flexibility and more options to do both. But our intention with this first one is to provide a sort of a reader friendly report, if you like, that anybody can sort of pick up and sort of identify what we've secured, where and sort of whereabouts in the city that's been secured, and the applications from the planning permissions from which they were secured by. So that's the intention with this first one.
Thank you, Mark. Councillor Waller, Becky's joined us now from her remote site visits. I don't know, Becky, whether you've anything to add to the comments that I made, and whether you heard all of those, and Mark, not sure.
I didn't hear. I've literally just got here from the virtual visit.
Right.
Sorry.
Okay.
Councillor Waller, we're ready. Is there any questions then, I guess, or others?
Right. I think the key is visibility of information. I know that councillors, on behalf of their role as community representatives, need to know what's available for schemes in their local area, and therefore I'm very keen that there is an easy to read summary available so that can be seen. It can be cross-referenced against individual planning applications, but doesn't require someone to go through the minutes of all planning committees to piece together the 106 monies. So I'm very happy for this to commence. Becky, it was just really, it's just really in relation to the response that we made to government on the proposed changes to planning law, and we may not see Section 106 for very much longer if government changes. So it's really wondering how getting people used to a visible system, that visibility can be maintained through whatever changes happen with the planning.
I think, Councillor Waller, it was
regulations.
probably the intention of these regulations to give visibility, particularly to community infrastructure levy, where authorities have greater scope to spend money on a whole range of infrastructure projects. Clearly, with Section 106 obligations, they are generally very specific. So the audit trail is quite easy to understand, and people can see from planning committee reports through to things that happen on the ground, where the money has gone. There's been no indication in the planning reforms that the visibility on these things would change, but clearly the future for SIL and 106 perhaps is a little uncertain.
I think that's something to keep our eye on, but I think this is a positive step forward. I'm conscious that it has been raised at a number of committee meetings over the years, and that it will answer a lot of questions that people raise, and therefore it then enables us to focus on what do we do with that resource to enhance provision in the local communities across the city.
You're quite right, and in my introduction, and Becky, I think possibly missed that, I said that the Section 106 obligations are required for planning purpose to mitigate the otherwise adverse impacts that developments can have. So they are very important in the whole sort of planning system, and sit with not only the details of the schemes which are considered by members and committees, the conditions that are attached to those, and the obligations are another part of that important framework to secure outcomes which are deemed to be satisfactory at the time decisions are made on those applications.
All right, and this would be an annual update, so I would get this report in a year's time so we can see how it's worked.
That's correct.
So I think that just needs to be added onto the recommendations. So I'm happy to agree the recommendations to get the ball rolling and delegate to the Corporate Director of Economy and Place, whilst noting that there will be an annual report to this decision session.
That's right. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, that brings us to the end of item 6. Brings us on to item 7, urgent business. I don't have any urgent business, so therefore I'll bring the meeting to a close. Thank you very much.